And I'm going to share my screen. So good morning. My name is Keturah Capadonia, and I'm the outreach consultant here at the Southern Tier Library System. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on grant writing basics. There will be time at the end for questions, but if you would like to ask questions as I move through the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat box or unmute yourself. That'll be fine. Either way works. And so let's get started. So some of the topics today we're going to cover is an overview of grant writing, locating data, locating funding sources, and tips for success. If there are aspects of grant writing that I don't touch on today and that you would like to learn more about, please feel free to email me after the program or drop a note in the chat and let me know so that I can plan future workshops or follow up with individual consultations with anyone who would like more information. Just a bit of background, I've been with the Southern Tier Library System for 7 years. Prior to that, I was a children's librarian and I was the director of a small and rural public library. So I've written quite a few grant applications during this time, and some have been successful and some have not been successful. I've also served as a grant reviewer for the American Library Association, the Arts Council of the Southern Finger Lakes, and for the STLS Outreach Grant Awards. So I have kind of worked on both ends of the spectrum. So let's talk about what is a grant and how can it help my library. A grant is financial support given to nonprofits by corporations, foundations, organizations, or government agencies. Grant funds do not need to be repaid. Grants require a complete cycle of work, including pre-grant work, such as the application writing and planning, implementation of the grant, and reporting and evaluation of grant-funded projects. There's a lot more to doing grant work than just submitting an application. I caution library personnel to be aware that they should not apply for grants unless they have the capacity and support to do all the work throughout the cycle. How do grants work? A grant is one part of a well-balanced basket of revenue streams for an organization. Grants provide funding for projects that increase awareness of organizations. They work with tax revenue, gifts and bequests, fundraising and investments to help fund nonprofit organizations. A grant can help bring publicity to your library and is often a source of community pride. It can demonstrate to your community the good work your library is doing to show that funders are awarding you money for projects. But remember, a grant is not fast and easy money. It involves a lot of work during the planning, implementation, and reporting stages. A grant is not a major part of your library's finances and should not be relied upon for long-term or repeated funding. Many experts in the field agree that a healthy nonprofit should never depend on grant funding for more than 30% of its total operating budget. A grant is not a sustainable funding source. Most grants are available to libraries to fund a project for a specific period of time, and the grants are very rarely able to be used for operating costs. Applying for and accepting grant funds is similar to your library signing a contract. Your library is stating and writing what they will do with the grant money they receive, and they're obligated to spend the funds and do the work as written in the application. Not fulfilling grant obligations can jeopardize a library's eligibility for future funding and give your library a bad reputation. Let's talk about 4 types of grants. The majority of grant opportunities for libraries are project grants. These grants can help your library support a specific program or project for a predetermined period of time. Capacity building grants can enable your library to do more in a particular area. These grants fund a process rather than a project. They develop competencies, strategies, systems, and structures in order to improve organizational effectiveness. These capacity-building grant activities strengthen an organization to grow its impact and accomplish its mission and goals. Operating fund grants are not plentiful. They help provide operating expenses. They're highly sought but extremely rare to find. And an in-kind grant can provide non-monetary help, such as books or equipment or personnel support. These grants are sometimes available to libraries to provide books and other library materials. What are grants about? Grants are not about money. Grants are not about your organization. Grants are about people, the people in your community. Grants are about locating a need that exists in your community for programs and services and filling that need. So how do we learn what people want and need? We look at focus group data if it exists, or strategic planning survey feedback. We look at community needs assessments. We have conversations with other organizational leaders, and we examine statistics about your community. Here's an example of a traditional grant cycle of work on the left and the more effective cycle we recommend using on the right. The one thing that we leave out of the traditional grant cycle is engaging with the community. So it can be easy to leave the community out of the grant planning process. If you have an idea that you think would be great for your library, it's tempting to just run with it. However, a grant-funded project can be more successful if you engage with the community to learn what your library can offer to fill gaps. It is important to engage with other organizations to learn what they are doing. Could you partner with them on an existing project? Could they partner with you on your grant application? How can you leverage more support for your project to ensure it is successful? Engagement with the community and with grant funders is key to the grant writing process. Here's a pro tip from STLS Executive Director Brian Hildreth, who's written and implemented numerous grant projects over several years. Create a relationship with a funder. Creating relationships with funders are key. Getting to know these people, even if it is not grant related, is so important. They will take care of you when you need their help, and you can help them when they need something from your organization. You can think of this as the 3 R's of grant writing: research, relationships, and writing. Conduct an initial assessment and ask yourself these questions before you start on a grant application. Schedule. Does the timeline work for us? Mission. Does this grant fit with our mission? Budget. Are the funds reimbursable or upfront funding? What are the allowable expenses? Risk. Perceived competition for funds. Eligibility. Do we meet eligibility? Sustainability. What will we do when the grant funding period ends? And capacity. Can our staff do this work in addition to their normal responsibilities? If you lack the capacity to do all the work on a grant, it's probably not a good use of your time to apply. SMART is an acronym to keep in mind when you're writing a grant application. You want to make sure the goals for your grant-funded project are SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Project plans which do not have SMART goals are unlikely to receive funding. Evaluation. There are 2 reasons evaluation of nonprofit programs is so necessary, especially when applying for grants. First, and perhaps the most important reason, is that evaluation helps your program. It gives your organization critical feedback that tells you if it works, how well it works, and how to improve it. Without evaluation, you're lacking a compass. Second, funders require evaluation. Every funder, whether a foundation, a corporation, or a government agency, wants to know if the project they funded worked or not. Types of evaluation: quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative methods measure or count data. They attempt to answer the question, how much, using statistical analysis such as averages, means, percentiles, etc. Use quantitative methods for issues that involve understanding quantities of frequency, determining cause and effect, comparing different things, or establishing numerical baselines. Qualitative methods use direct or indirect contact with people. They can consist of interviews, observation, or review of relevant documents. Qualitative methods can be quite rigorous and be excellent for studying processes and meanings, but they do not measure. Use qualitative methods for questions that involve understanding the feelings or opinions of people, to gain insight into relationships or patterns, to gather multiple perspectives on a particular subject or problem, to identify approximate rather than exact information. Qualitative types of gathering information include interviews, focus groups, observation, surveys, questionnaires, or exit slips with space for open-ended answers. And quantitative feedback, and it includes door counts, RSVPs, circ statistics, database or website hits, social media statistics, or surveys, questionnaires, and exit slips where people rank or pick from predetermined choices. Sustainability. Funders want your organization to succeed long after their investment. Be sure the organization or program description demonstrates sustainable fiscal capacity and self-sufficiency. List other funding sources if you have them. Funders are not competing with each other. They're comfortable collaborating with industry friends who back the same organizations. You want to show that as an organization, you will be accountable for ensuring the continuation of your project. Some strategies for sustainability include monetary, such as phasing in small participation fees over time, phase in new allocations of budgets moving forward once success is established and you have won supporters over, which would just be slowly switching your budget streams. You can also leverage project success and partnerships into cost efficiencies moving forward, such as merging some services for costs to save money. Lay the groundwork for future crowdfunding campaigns or millage. Use this when going up for votes for your library budget referendums. Strategies for sustainability in time. Permanently reallocate program hours to accommodate a new program. Be clear about what will be phased out to make room for an anticipated new program. If space permits, consider hosting 2 events at once to use library staff time efficiently. And strategies for sustainability and staffing. Change a culture moving forward. If the proposed project includes training, then the years of the project can start building the new habit of continuous learning, swapping of ideas that cost little to sustain over time. Phase in volunteers or interns to help run programs so that staff time is freed up. And consider a co-op model for family events. One key that can help make applying for multiple grants easy is to create a document library. Get organized in advance by assembling a document library that can be used whenever your organization is applying for grants. Information you'll want to keep in your document library include your 501c3 documentation and your employer identification number, your legal organization name and bylaws, your mission statement, a short history of your library, short bios of key staff, list of current board members, board-approved annual budget, the most recent audit or 990, letters of support or recommendation, and your annual report to the community. Other information you want to keep on hand include your service population, your number of registered card holders, number of programs and number of attendees in previous years, and circulation statistics. And in the case of grants made by businesses, you'll want to have information on how far away your library is from certain stores. Build a community profile. Successful narratives help the reader envision your community in order to have a context upon which to envision the proposed funded project. Use a combination of descriptive language, relevant statistics, cultural social heritage, major employers or industries, socioeconomic shifts, and other details that help your community spring to life in the minds of grant reviewers. If you're feeling stumped, consider contacting your local Chamber of Commerce, Visitors Bureau, or Tourism Bureau to see how they describe your community. Just know that those organizations have a vested interest in describing your community in glowing terms, whereas a more balanced and/or realistic overview may help establish your community's need for this project more effectively. Never assume that the grant reviewers will be familiar with your community. Usually grant applications are read by multiple reviewers. They may come from across the state, across the region, across the country. And so they may not be familiar with your community, and you need to illustrate what is unique about your community in your community profile. What are funders looking for? Funders want your organization to succeed long after their investment. Be sure the organization or program description demonstrates sustainable fiscal capacity and self-sufficiency. List other funding sources if you have them. List other successful projects you have completed with grant funds. Brag about your library a bit. Applications are usually read, as I said, by several people on a team of reviewers. They read all the applications and then share their thoughts with other people on the team. Funding decisions are usually made by multiple people working together, not just one person. Funders want to see a clear need, what's in it for them, a known and reliable grantee, proof of impact, and evidence that the program can be sustained and you'll not be asking them for more money year after year. Looking at data. Why is data important on a grant application? Increasingly, funders will want to see that there is evidence to prove that what you are applying for is needed in the community or location where you are applying. How can you prove it? Have you looked at national statistics and seen if your area performs above or below the national average? Have you conducted quantitative or qualitative surveys or other forms of feedback in your community to see what the residents say? In order to demonstrate the extent of the need, it is often useful to cite statistics from a recognized source. So do some homework, ask around, find out what the needs in your community are and what is the evidence for it. Data should demonstrate the needs of your community. You can write, we have many poor families in our community, but you could alternatively write 24% of families in town are living under the poverty rate, which is higher than the New York State average. You just consider which of those statements might make a stronger impact. When you look at data, you'll want to look for pockets of need. Some indicators could be average age of population, the population density, presence or absence of public transportation, the unemployment rate, education levels of your population, or the percentage living in poverty. Sources for data. Here I've just included a list of some of the ones I use most frequently. The Esri Tapestry, New York State Quick, which is the Kids Wellbeing Indicator Clearinghouse. So that has information particular to children and families, as well as does the Kids Count Data Center. That's a national clearinghouse for data. Census data, always helpful. New York State Department of Labor for labor statistics, New York State Health Department for health information, and as well as your county health department, which has more local health information. If you plan to apply for grants often or on a regular basis, you might consider creating a data sheet to keep your statistics in a handy all-in-one space. You can see here a data sheet I use to keep track of statistics in the counties served by the Southern Tier Library System. This helps me compare county averages to each other and to the New York State average. And this just saves me time. When I'm writing a grant application, I can look here for the data that I want to include. It's just an idea if grant writing is something you're going to be doing frequently. Funding sources. This is probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked. Where can I find funding sources for grants? So we do have a website, which I'll put the link to after our presentation. We have a tab on our STLS website where I list current opportunities and have other annual opportunities listed as well. Additionally, I send out a monthly newsletter during the first week of each month called Reaching Out, which covers topics about outreach, and I include current grant opportunities there. Other places to find grant opportunities include listservs from Nyline, ALA, PLA, the Public Library Association, and other professional organizations. Community foundations in your area are also a great place to look. Federal funding sources. Here's just a few. Institute of Library and Museum Services, IMLS, National Library of Medicine, National Endowment for the Arts, and National Endowment for the Humanities. And national grant opportunities are usually extremely competitive because they accept applications from all over the country. New York State funding sources. Humanities New York has 3 types of grants: action grants, vision grants, and quick grants that they accept funding for. New York State Program for the Conservation and Preservation of Library Research Materials provides funding for libraries and other organizations engaged in efforts to preserve deteriorating library research materials. And state aid for library construction. If you have questions about that, please feel free to email Brian Hildreth. We also have a tab on our website for information on that. And then regional funding sources. So your community foundations, depending on where you're located, the ones in our service area include the Allegheny County Area Foundation, the Community Foundation of Elmira, Corning, and the Finger Lakes, and arts councils. We have 3 of those that serve the libraries in our counties, which are the Arts Council for the Southern Finger Lakes, the Arts Council for Wyoming County, and the Auburn Public Theater. STLS has grants available from the Foundation for Southern Tier Libraries and COSAC Outreach Mini Grants and DEI Micro Grants. And there are other charitable foundations that exist, such as the Pilcrow Foundation. These I list on our webpage. Other sources can include professional organizations such as ALA, Association for Library Services to Children, YALSA, the Young Adult Library Services Association, PLA, and ARSL, the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. They make funds available through their listservs and their websites. Those are places to check out. A few national foundations can include the Ezra Jack Keats Foundation, Autism Welcome Here, and then some corporations and businesses often also offer grants, including Dollar General, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, and Best Buy. And for those, sometimes you need to be located near a store to apply, but it's certainly worth looking into. Partners. Funders seek collaborations in applications because they often lead to better results. Collaboration can be extremely powerful. Some grant applications require you to have a partnership with at least one other source. Projects with partnerships have a higher success rate and increase the likelihood that the project will have a larger impact. This helps reassure the funder that they are getting the most bang for their donation buck. Look for possible partners in your community. These could be organizations that are doing work similar to what you have in mind for your grant project. Find out what is going on with local organizations by attending community meetings, Rotary Club meetings, reading newsletters, or just talking to representatives from other organizations. And I know that some of you are in very small communities, so you might not have a Rotary Club or a Lions Club, but you might have a health facility, you might have churches, nursing homes, assisted living centers, museums or historical societies. These could all be potential partners that you could consider. So here are just a few final reminders to keep in mind. Follow specific application instructions, meet deadlines, use a realistic budget, submit proposals which demonstrate thoughtful planning, make sure your project meets the purpose of the grant, make sure your application language echoes grant guideline language, have at least 2 other people proofread your application before you submit. And I'm happy to do that for you. If you need somebody, feel free to email me. And try to communicate with the funders before you submit. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out, email, or call the name listed on a grant application website or announcement and let them know you're interested and just ask questions. Common mistakes or reasons why you might not receive grant funds. You didn't tailor your ask. So your specific application didn't seem specific to the grant opportunity. You might have just copied and pasted from another application. Shoehorning, which is where you have a project you want to get funded, so you just apply to a grant whether or not that really fits your project. It's just you're shoehorning in to get your needs met. Miss deadlines, make sure you're always meeting deadlines. If it's an online application, sometimes the application period will end at like midnight. Make sure it's in the correct time zone. Make sure you're checking that when you're applying so you don't apply a few hours late. Being a stranger, so if you didn't make any contact with a grant funder before you applied, they might not choose your application and they might choose to go with someone who they've spoken with. Sloppiness, things like grammar errors, spelling mistakes, lack of effort. Usually a grant reviewers can tell whether or not a person who's written a grant application has put a lot of time and effort into it. And sometimes when you're reading multiple applications and you see some that just don't show much effort, you put those at the bottom of the pile. Jargon, when you're using terms that the grant reviewer might not understand, maybe you refer to circ statistics, but you don't explain that that means circulation statistics, or you use the phrase ILL without explaining that means interlibrary loan. And then budget errors, believe it or not, I have seen these where people just, get sloppy with the budget and their budget doesn't add up to the amount that they're asking for or the amount that's available. Here are some resources. I'll send the slides out after the presentation and you can click on any of these. ALA has a grant database. Scholastic Library lists grants, particularly for children's programs and resources. WebJunction is a source that has a lot of articles and webinar recordings on grant writing. YALSA has a Partnering to Increase Your Impact resource. And then there's Candid, which was formerly known as the Foundation Center. And the Community Toolbox Applying for Grants Toolkit, as well as the STLS LibGuide, as I mentioned before, on grant writing. Now I'm pleased to take any questions. If anybody has any, you're free to unmute yourself or pop questions in the chat. And if you don't think of any questions now, but you'd like to follow up later, please feel free to email me. My email address is on the screen. I'm also happy to come out and do consultations on grant writing with any individuals who are interested. Or as I said before, I'm happy to review your grant proposals. You can email those to me and I will review them and send comments back to you.
I have a question, Katara.
Sure.
So I'm kind of new to the library board thing. And libraries by default are 501c3 organizations, she says with a question in her voice.
Your your library should be, yes.
And but well, and I'm also thinking about some other things I have going on in my life. There are certainly um uh, grant opportunities if you are a for-profit entity. I mean, that's not specific to the library things, but
Mhm.
it's a whole different thing. Um, and geez, I haven't crafted this question very well, have
That's okay.
I? Hmm. In my village, we have a incestuous relationship with the village that owns our building.
Mhm.
So sometimes getting funding for building repairs falls into kind of a gray area that I clearly haven't got through my head yet.
Mhm.
Um, so the nonprofit of it is more for programming and buying supplies for programs and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah, most of the grants that are available for libraries are usually for programs or resources, collection development. We do have New York State Construction Aid, which is its own program. Um, and let me just get the link for that. Uh, I'll just drop this in the chat. So Brian Hildreth oversees our construction aid program, and he has the website with information there. But yeah, for the most part, most of the grant programs that we see available for public libraries are project type temporary funds, not operating funds. Does
Yeah.
that answer your question?
Yes, as poor as it was.
No, no, it's
Thank you.
fine.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have any questions? Any comments? Any grant projects you're working on that you want to talk about? Feel free to share. Okay, well then we will wrap it up.